Just before we get this session started, I want to introduce myself. My name's Sarah. I'm a member of Team 7373 Eagle Robotics. My freshman year, I was a member of Team 11364. You can see some of our highlights to the left, and then the past season's highlight as well. Over the years, I have been and continue to be the Business Notebook Outreach and Marketing Manager. So as you can see from this, I'm talking about something that I love to do. All right, let's get into the importance. So why are you here? Why are we talking about this? Well, first, social media and some of these communication strategies showcase your team accomplishments, designs, and events. This might seem like the most obvious reason to have social media, but you're going to showcase these things through things like pictures, captions, and any written communication that you put out. Next, this provides essential content that can be utilized in other areas of the team. This may not make sense just looking at it initially, but as I continue talking through this session, you're going to find out how social media and team communication can help you with the notebook, outreach events, and all aspects of the team. And then finally, this allows for meaningful connections with sponsors, other STEM professionals in the community, as well as your fellow teams and first members. All right, and as we go throughout this session, you're going to see little light bulbs at the bottom. This is some of the most important information that I want you to remember. So looking at this light bulb before we get started, when used correctly, social media can be one of your team's most valuable tools, and you're going to see that as we continue. All right. So the breakdown. I've broken my session down into about 3 sections. First, we're going to start off with marketing, branding, and professionalism. How do you want your team to look, and what do you want other teams to visualize when they think about you? Next, we're going to talk about the platforms to use. When starting social media or continuing the presence you already have, what platforms should you use? Who are you going to reach with these platforms? And what kind of content are you going to put out? Finally, communication and presentation. All right, you have your market, you have your branding done, and maybe you even have some platforms established. But how are you going to continue communicating with the community? All right, where to begin? Most importantly, it is never, ever too late to get on social media and to start communicating. So even if your season has started, since we started yesterday with kickoff, start posting. Remember, your team is always doing something. Even though we're mostly virtual this year, your team is probably still practicing, doing outreach events, and even competing virtually or in person. Post about this. All right, marketing and team branding. So this includes things like team colors, your logos, your mascots, and then also what I call your team look. When you're at a competition or at an event, what kind of jersey are you wearing? Are you wearing a polo, a t-shirt? Do you have a color scheme or something that makes you stand out? And I want you to think about it throughout the entire thing, from logos to your team look and even your mascot. What do you want teams to visualize? What's going to make you stand out from everyone else? All right, let's look at some examples. So huge shout out to some of the teams that let me use their materials: Galactic Lions, Team 5898, Ultraviolet, Team 18304, and Duck Ties and Zip Tape, Team 10068. Go out and follow all of these teams on social media. They're all great examples. On the far left, you can see a mascot example. This is Leo the Lion of the Galactic Lions. He came to the state event, and it was something that made this team stand out. He pumped up the crowd, he communicated with fellow teams, and it made you remember the Galactic Lions. On the far right is something from my program's rookie team. Team 11364 has a color guide that says dark blue and dark gray are going to be used on team jerseys and the team notebook, and it's going to be put out on all team collateral. We also use accent colors, gold and Dodger blue. Maybe this is a stripe on the jersey, or a little bit of splash of color in the team notebook, but it's not going to be something that's used everywhere. We've developed this style guide and you stick to it. Finally, in the middle, 2 of my favorite team logos: Ultraviolet, Duck Ties, and Zip Tape. Look at how Ultraviolet uses this logo with a bright purple and a white. It stands out and it's going to make you remember that team. Duck Ties and Zip Tape has a special team name and a special team logo. It's something that's unique to them and that all teams are going to remember. All right, so now that you have your marketing and your branding, and you've started your social media thoughts, what kind of platforms are you going to use? I divide this into 4 categories, and we'll go into detail for each one. Your mainstream platforms are going to be things like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Streaming platforms like YouTube, websites, and then written communication. So down at the bottom it says every platform reaches a different group. Use the platforms, or in my opinion, multiple platforms that best fit your team. All right, let's start with some of these mainstream platforms. Instagram, Facebook, maybe Twitter, and a couple others. What kind of content are you going to post? You're going to post about practices, competitions, robot design, and outreach events. With these pictures, keep in mind, you want high quality pictures, and then also you want to include team members in the pictures. Even if you're posting something about robot design, don't just post a picture of the robot. Post your team discussing this, someone drawing, someone sketching ideas out on a whiteboard. Make it very personal so that other teams can get to know you. Then if you're posting about practices and competitions, you may want to post those results, but make sure you post pictures of people driving, people building or designing. With your wording, I always recommend keeping captions short and use hashtags so that your posts show up more. And then finally, post on your story as well. Whether you're posting daily or weekly on your actual feed, make sure you're posting on your story little snapshots of what you're doing. People want to stay updated. Then also the crowd. So when you're thinking about using mainstream platforms like this, you're going to be connecting with other teams, first students, and honestly a younger crowd. So while I do recommend having mainstream social media platforms, you're probably going to want to combine it with something else like a website or written communication so that you can connect with an older crowd and also those STEM professionals and sponsors. All right, streaming platforms, something like YouTube. YouTube and other streaming platforms are essential to your team. You're going to post things like robot matches and practice runs. So maybe your team did really well at a competition or they didn't. You're going to want to post all of your robot runs, post highlights, and then even practice runs. What's something that your robot can do now that you're excited and you want to show everyone else? Or maybe there's a specific part of the robot that you want to showcase. Post all of this on streaming platforms like YouTube. And especially with virtual events this year, you're going to want to make sure that you have a strong presence. How are you going to find out what other teams are doing or how they're performing in matches if you're not posting anything about it? I also recommend posting tutorials, but don't just make it about the robot design. Post outreach tutorials, social media tutorials, and things like Notebook. It'll bring in a wider audience. Then, as we talked about earlier, this will help you in other aspects of the team. So YouTube and other streaming platforms are one of the best ways to show that you're not only looking to better your team throughout the season, you're also looking to help the teams around you. So then the crowd that you're going to be reaching. When you're thinking about using a streaming platform, you're probably going to be connecting with other first teams. You might also be connecting with their coaches and mentors. But again, this is probably a younger crowd and it's not going to reach those sponsors, although I would still say it's essential. All right, so some of my favorite team Instagrams and then YouTube channels. On the far left, you have Ultraviolet. I want to point out something about this team. They keep to the color scheme and the branding, which is essential. You can see their logo in the middle of that post and then also as their profile picture on the account. This makes sure that everyone who's viewing this account knows who it is. Duck Ties and Zip Tape, I took a little farther picture out to show you what a more developed feed is going to look like. So as you can see, Duck Ties and Zip Tape post pictures of their entire team. It's a very personal account. They also post things like memes to help connect with other teams. Don't make it so serious that you can't have fun with it as well. In the middle, one of my team's personal favorite YouTube channels, Wizards.exe. This is an FTC team that posts award ceremony highlights, robot matches highlights, and even some tutorials. This is definitely part of their team's outreach, and it's helping teams just like mine. All right, so let's get into websites. This is one of the most professional ways to inform others about your team. With this website and or any kind of written communication that your team develops, you're going to be reaching STEM professionals, potential sponsors, and existing sponsors. When you're setting up a website, it might seem a little daunting, and you don't really know where to start. Begin by including information about the game. You want to keep in mind that people who are looking at this website might not be familiar with the FIRST program or your team as a whole. So once you've maybe put the game trailer, put different captions about FIRST out on your website, you're going to want to introduce your team. How does your team fit into the FIRST program that you've already introduced? If you'd like to, you can also post team member Introductions and a short bio. Make sure to include lots of pictures and little captions to explain everything. Finally, once you've introduced first program, the first game, and then how your team fits into that, compile the robotics resources. Give competition history, some competition success. What are you most proud of? If you're a new team, you can post where you want to be, some of your future goals, and how you're planning to get there. Also include contact information, any other social media accounts that you have, whether it's something mainstream, a streaming service, or any kind of newsletter that you send out. Make sure teams have a way to get in touch with you that way. All right, so the crowd that you're going to reach with something like a website. So I would say this is what's going to give you the largest following. You're going to reach fellow first teams, other members in the first community, first alumni, their coaches and mentors, but you're also going to be able to reach STEM professionals and then also potential sponsors. What's the first way that someone's probably going to find your team? It's going to be something like putting in a search bar on YouTube, looking up your team name, and your website's going to be the first thing that pops up. So make sure that the first thing that other teams see is what they're going to remember about you. And I want to give a quick story just to show how important something like a website is. Outreach centers are also going to be able to reach you this way. One time, my team was looking for some outreach to complete for this season. We felt like we wanted to get out into the community a bit more. We started posting on our website saying, hey, look at the past outreach we've done. This is more of what we want to do. How can we help you? And we had multiple people start contacting us, and that was one way that we were able to grow our outreach program. So that just shows you how a website can be the most important thing. All right, written communication. Now, one thing about written communication is it's probably going to be the most exclusive way that you're going to reach people. This is something like a newsletter or an email list. So you're going to be able to give details about your team through this because you're sending it to a select crowd. You're going to have to know these people to get them on the email list or on a newsletter list. But the advantage of this is that it's not a mainstream account like Instagram. You don't have a word limit. You're not only posting one picture. You're able to give detailed updates on your robot, your competition results, outreach events, and upcoming opportunities. The best way to use a newsletter or other kinds of written communication is to connect with sponsors, families, and other supporters. Maybe you want to reach a crowd that's not on Instagram, not on Facebook, or doesn't have the time to go search through your website. Add them to a written communication newsletter list, with their permission, of course, and then you can give them detailed results. They'll be sent directly to them. Let's look at some examples of this. As you can see on the far left at the top is my team's website. This is one of the pictures that pops up first. So on this page, you can see that the home button is selected. Here we're going to introduce the first game for the season and the first program as a whole. We're an FTC team, so we're going to explain what that means, but we also have FLL teams, so we'll give a little bit of background on that. The first website, Georgia First Robotics, you can see it's very clean cut. You have your First LEGO League Junior, First LEGO League, and First Tech Challenge. It's easy to read. They use lots of colors, lots of pictures. Make sure it's interactive and something that people are going to want to continue looking through. Finally, on the far right, you can see an Eagle Robotics newsletter that we produce. We send these out once a month. It's all student written. And we use a picture at the top. You can see that we like to include the entire team in this main picture. It shows that it's not just one or two people communicating. If you were to scroll down on this newsletter, you would see that we give robot updates. We give competition results, upcoming outreach events. We show what we've done in the past, what we're doing at the moment, and then what we have coming up. This also keeps people engaged. They want to read the next newsletter because they know what's going to be coming up. All right, so some final notes. This is probably the most important slide. So it's all about professionalism. When we're talking about posting, even if it's on a website or a platform like Instagram, Facebook, it's something mainstream where you're connecting with people your own age, you want to keep everything you post professional. You're going to act like everyone will see everything. And yes, I did use that word a lot, but that's because it's essential. Any picture you post, any captions used could go out to anyone in the community. Make sure you keep your wording professional. Don't use anything offensive. Keep to those first values that we always are talking about. Also, stick to the branding. If you have established a style guide, you have set colors, you have a set theme, you're going to want to stick to this. As I talked about with Ultraviolet, they used that one logo, it was on their post, it was their profile picture. They're not using a bunch of things. You know that team when you see it. But I will say, while this is true and you want to stick to the branding, if your team wants to rebrand, that's perfectly okay. Maybe you're tired of your style guide. You want to revamp it a little bit for the next season. That's fine. Announce it on social media. Put it out on your website. Hey, we used to be bright orange. Now we're bright purple. Look at our new team. Come check us out. But then change everything. Make sure you're going back and sticking to the style guide that you've now prepared. Also, this is one of my biggest pet peeves. Stay up to date and active. Post regularly. Stay active on your account. With everything being virtual this year, teams might think they're going to have a hard time starting social media. You don't have in-person events to post about, or most of us don't. But post about your practices. What is your team doing for fun? How are you doing virtual outreach events and bringing everyone in the community in? Give robot updates, but remember when you're giving these updates, keep it personal. Take pictures of the team, take pictures of what you're doing. All right, so that was a very quick presentation. I went through everything quickly, but social media is a lot simpler than it sounds. It might be a daunting task to begin with, but start with something mainstream. Start with Instagram or a platform that you're comfortable with. Then build out a website. Get written communication. Most teams already have sponsors in place. Ask them if you can add them to a newsletter. You have your parents as part of the team. You have family members who want to know what you're up to. Add them to email lists. It's an easy place to start. And once you add one thing, it'll get easier and easier to add more social media platforms. So I'm going to move into some questions. We're going to do a quick session. So if I went too quickly, or there's something you would like me to cover more in depth, let's get some questions started. But also, we'll just go over some contact info. You can always email me. You can always email my team, Eagle Robotics, or go back through this PowerPoint on our website. Then also, we use some FIRST resources to go over this. You can look at the Georgia FIRST website, or a PDF that they publish called Social Media and Website Guidelines for more information. All right, so we'll start some questions if we have any. All right, one thing I also want to say is if you're ever having a question about what's something appropriate to post, is this picture too much? Is it giving away too much information about my team? You can always ask a coach, a mentor, or another team like mine. You always get a second opinion if you're not sure about what to post. And I also want to thank the teams that let me use their social media materials, Ultraviolet, Galactic Lions, Duck Ties, and Zip Tape, and then Wizards.exe. Y'all go follow them, check out all their social media accounts. They're definitely the model teams out there. All right, I know this was a quick session, but we'll give it maybe 2 or 3 more minutes if we don't have any questions. I know I always like to be let out of class early, so I will let y'all go.
Thank you everyone for coming to the session this morning. Sir, you presented very well, and I should probably stop this recording.
All right, yeah, that sounds good.